So welcome to our December resource group. We're super excited to have you today. We are a small but mighty group. I suspect the holidays are getting people at this point trying to crush everything in, but this will be available to people forever on our YouTube channel. And so whatever we share today will certainly help others along the line. Very briefly, remember to put your information in the chat. I think you've all heard that from me. Candace, make sure you get your info in there. What we're going to do is we're going to start out with a thank you to our sponsors, talk about Arryved for a minute as our sponsor today. Then we'll kind of dive into our contributors spotlight and kind of do our interactive storytelling interview. And Nancy has said she's more than happy to have questions or comments as we go through. So feel free to bring up any questions you might have in mind. Once we kind of wrap up that contributor spotlight, we'll open the floor to any questions, including zoning that you guys might have that we might be able to brainstorm about with you or offer any experience that we've had with that. I wanted to mention briefly what we have coming up soon. We have quite a bit coming up, actually. We are starting a new podcast. So the Start A Brewery podcast is going to launch January 3rd is the date. We're hoping that that's going to work at 12:01. That's a Tuesday. And then be released every other Tuesday thereafter. We're going to start with the dream and move our way through the different stages of the business plan and then into plan, act, open, and grow in sync with our website. Our next resource group is going to be January 11th. That's going to be Eric Fowler from White Labs. And he's going to talk about how proper yeast handling impacts your cost of goods. So I think that's going to be an interesting ingredient dive that also gets into accounting. Then February 15th is our first quarterly educational webinar for 2023. That's going to be John Hyman, and he's going to talk about crafting your craft brewery's employee handbook. He's with Wiccan Panzer and Herza here in Ohio. Then we have our February 22nd is going to be Tom Hennessy, and he's going to be our next resource group. Which is going to be super interesting to put him in the spotlight with his background in the Frankenbrew models and everything that he's done in the brewing world. I also wanted to let everybody know we will have a lounge at the Craft Brewers Conference right outside of the expo. We're super excited about that. We'll have a lot of our contributors present. So if you'd like to swing by our booth and collect business cards, talk to people, brainstorm, hang out, charge your phone, do whatever. We're going to be hanging out there and we'll have a presence together. So to start off, thank you to Arryved. Nancy, your team has done a fantastic, and we super appreciate your support over the last 6 months supporting these resource groups. So I want to give you a couple minutes just to talk about Arryved and what you do in the industry.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Arryved is a point of sale. We like to say point of service because it's not just about making money. It's actually about providing a quality experience to your guests. We're very focused on the beverage industry. Our roots are in breweries. We work with I'd say about 15 to 20% of the craft brewing industry so far are partners with our platform, and growing every day. And our model is very different than a typical point of sale. We're not just a software provider. We're actually an industry participant, and we're very active in the industry. We're very active with all of the guilds, and we do act as a partner to our customers who onboard, making recommendations, helping them understand how they can flex both the product and their service model.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. So let's flip hats. We're not totally changing hats here. But let's move into the spotlight. So the format that we have for this is kind of a loose interview. And what we really want to do with these is get to know our contributors, kind of your background, where you came from, what you do in the industry, and how we would integrate with you or recommend you or ask questions of you that would be relevant. So let's just start out with a little intro, your title, your role, kind of where you're based, and who are you? What do you like to do when you're not doing craft beer stuff?
You bet. Well, I'm Nancy Trigg. Company's Arryved, and I'm currently the Chief People Officer at the company. I was, for the first 5 years, the Chief Growth Officer and President, but chose to step down earlier in 2022, whatever year this is. Yeah, 2022. and really focus on our human relationships, both inside the company and outside. So I focus on our partnerships and I focus on our staff as my priorities at this point.
Excellent. So what do you do when you're not doing beer?
I'm an outdoor person. I live in Colorado, so I love to be outside with my dogs on my bike, paddleboarding. I don't ski, however. It's always the first thing people ask me. I live in Colorado and I do not ski, but just about everything else outdoors is where my passion lies for sure.
Excellent.
And I
Maybe
love my dogs.
we'll find you in the snow on the mountains.
There you go. I'll be walking around the
Yes, well,
Colorado. Yeah,
hiking with me and your dogs.
there you go.
So what service do you do with or for clients, and what problems do you solve? So I guess this is a little bit in your role as people officer and a little bit of, how does Arryved approach the industry?
You bet. Well, on the product side, I'll talk about that first. So I mentioned that we say point of service, not point of sale. And that's because we really want folks to be thinking about their service model as they're making software decisions, right? I think very often the things like, what's my credit card processing fee going to be, take priority over how do I want to operate. And we want people to be thinking about how they're going to operate first and foremost in their business. And we want to help them through that process of making those decisions, particularly if they're a new establishment. So it's a much more interactive process. On my side, one of the things that we did as an organization from the very beginning is we intentionally hired folks from the service industry. So over half of our staff has worked as a front of house manager, a bartender, a server, even owners of breweries and similar establishments. And part of that, the initial reason was that we wanted our employees to be able to very well or strongly relate to our customers and be able to understand their struggles. But what resulted in bringing in the best and the brightest from the service industry is we have a massively strong service culture internally with our company. So everybody, and you probably know this, you've met a lot of our team. There's a love and a passion in our team that's very focused on service to each other, service to the community. And my role is to ensure that continues as we grow, right? You can have a great culture. It's easy to have a great culture and maintain that when you're small. But as you start growing as an organization, you have to make it an intentional part of everything you do. Again, both internally and externally in order to keep that going. And that's where I come in.
Excellent. So you've gone from kind of nurturing the whole company to nurturing those who are the company.
Correct.
Do you also, are you kind of responsible for wrangling what their values are and kind of helping to direct the values of the company? Like, one of the things, I didn't read our mission statement like I normally do, but we're looking to kind of raise the bar on startups, but at the same time that we lower the barrier to entry for those who don't have a path currently. How do you wrangle your values versus your community engagement?
Well, first of all, we talk about our values. We
Mm-hmm.
talk about them all the time. In every new hire training and every onboarding, we talk about them in every monthly all hands meeting and why they matter. One of the things that we really teach and encourage in our organization is to speak up and to hold those of us in leadership accountable. Right? We don't operate in a top-down fashion. I mean, obviously some decisions have to be made that way, but what we want to instill in our employees is that this is their company. It belongs to them, and they need to be, speaking up and holding us all accountable so that we continue to elevate the performance and, the value commitment in our organization.
Very cool. I think that that's something that everybody needs to work on doing in their own environment, which is a challenge for those who are short-staffed and have no time. But so learning how to do that. So how did you first get involved in craft beer? So tell us your beer story.
Okay, well, it's an interesting story because I didn't know there was like a craft beer industry, if I'm being honest. I liked beer and had started to find out that there was different kinds of beer. And I was working at Google, and our founder of Arryved, David, also worked there. And back in the day, this was in the early 2000s, Google gave a lot of freedom to the employees to kind of create the environment we worked in. And so David and a few other engineers built a bar and started home brewing beer within the company. I don't think they probably allow that anymore, but that's what was happening at the time. And our friendship grew from that, right? We'd have afternoon like beer tastings of the beers they brewed. And that's when I first learned that there was actually kind of this culture of beer, this community of beer, that it wasn't just a product to buy off a shelf. And then when David left Google, his intention was to take the technical skills that he had learned through his tenure there and bring it to an industry he was passionate about, which was craft beer. And I raised my hand and said, sign me up. I'm in for whatever that looks like. And that's when my journey into craft beer as a profession and as an industry began.
Awesome. So have you kind of honed in on a certain style of beer, or what's your path through
I like
craft beer now?
dark lagers,
Dark?
sports beers, and the higher ABV Belgian beers, quads, triples.
Are you a foodie with it? Do you like to have it with meals?
No. I don't eat with beer. Not at all. I will have a beer after dinner or before dinner, right when I get home from work, things like that. But I don't typically mix the two.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very cool. So now we also have answered the question of what has led you to your space in craft beer today. But tell us a little bit about how Arryved has grown.
You bet. So when we first started, we were working with a couple of local Colorado craft breweries. Didn't really know even what this company was going to be. The plan was originally to do order and pay from your phone on premise. And that was in 2015. And the breweries that we were talking to were like, okay, that's cool, but nah, we're not ready for that. The industry's not ready for that. And that was a true statement, right? Like the industry wasn't ready for that sort of technology yet. But the comment we kept getting was, but could you make a point of sale? Because there's nothing that services this industry and we're really struggling. And that struggle was around movement of guests, right? Guests move in breweries, and the point of sale industry was focused on either sort of that retail, walk up to a counter and buy something, or restaurant, which is where servers move, but not guests. And so there was a real pain point there that they asked us to solve. Additionally, customer support and service in the point of sale industry was horrible, right? Like people were telling us stories of, being told by their point of sale that they had to wait 6 weeks to schedule a call, or sitting on hold for 4 hours on a Friday night when their system went down. And so David, after multiple no's, he kept saying, no, I don't want to build a point of sale. Finally understood that there was a need, and he said yes. He knew how to do it, and he built it. The intention really was slow growth, right? We were just going to kind of slow grow the organization, not grow very big or fast, and just keep trying to solve pain points locally. But when you do something the industry needs, word gets out. So we have continued to grow. For the first 3.5, 4 years, we grew almost with no marketing spend. It was all organic, word of mouth within the industry. And we're now about 2,000 customers strong, and still growing. So it's been quite the journey. And of course, I think as everyone knows now, due to COVID, and we'll talk about that at some point, the industry got ready real fast for those contactless ordering options and consumer facing ordering options. And we had already started because that was the original plan. So it was easy for us to roll those things out during COVID, and that's now part of what we do as well. So it's no longer just the point of sale, it's the guest-facing ordering options, e-commerce, all of that.
Right. And certainly for my own personal technology skills, they ramped up very quickly.
Yeah.
Going from not really being quite sure I was going to like launch that Zoom meeting or set it up correctly, now it's kind of reflex.
Yeah, people got it ready for a lot of things real fast. Mm-hmm.
Kind of crazy. Okay, well, what's the coolest project you ever worked on related to the industry?
For me, it's actually something I'm doing right now or just finished up. I just did my first cohort with the BA mentor program. And, I'm not sure how long that program, sorry, let me drink some water real quick. How long that program's been around, but it is amazing. There's a lot of folks who want to be in this industry and don't know kind of what's next for them. They're in different stages of their journey towards craft beer or in craft beer. I originally thought, there really wasn't much I had to offer. I don't own a brewery. I never have. But once I signed up for the program, I realized just how much we all have to offer, right? Like we all, regardless of where we are in our journey, we've had experiences of some kind. And other people can really benefit from those experiences, even if they are your peers, right? So it's been just a great experience for me. I've met some fascinating people on different stages of that journey. Not everyone's looking to open a brewery. Some people just really want to work for one and they don't know how to take those first steps. So it's a great, great program. I'm excited to see how it continues to develop over the next couple of years. And if there's other of the cohorts watching this or even other folks that might be a little bit farther along in the new brewery space, like that's a great way to give back and contribute. So
No doubt. Julie and I are both mentors, and Julie's been there since day one, so she can tell you how many is that? 5 cohorts, Julie?
The spring will be 5.
Yeah.
And I can't quit it.
Yeah.
My therapist yells at me. She's like, you need to give up something. And I'm like, but the value that I get like outweighs the time commitment, stress that it puts on my schedule during that time. Like I get so much out of it. And I'm the one mentoring.
Correct.
But it's Nancy, I know you get it. And I know Laura, like it's awesome.
It's amazing.
I have nothing but good, wonderful, happy things to say about that program.
Yeah. And I can't wait to start seeing the mentors, a year from now or 2 years from now and seeing what they're doing, or the mentees, and see what they're doing and how their careers are advancing. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, for both Paul and Eli on this call, maybe that's something to look into, because there are startup tracks and in the mentors program. So that might be something that would be of interest. And I know that the Axion Opportunity Fund and Brewing the American Dream all have complementary coaching / mentoring opportunities as well. Okay, so let's switch from coolness to complex and problematic. Is that where the pandemic comes in?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I wonder how long we're going to be talking about this. I'm almost expecting like business school to be teaching about what happened during 2020, 50 years from now, because it's such a thing. But, 2020 happened and or COVID happened, let's just call it what it was. And our worlds turned completely upside down, right? You might think we were safe as a tech company and not a brewery, but the reality is we only make money if our customers make money. So our customers all shut their doors. We lost all of our revenue. We had at the time 40 plus mouths to feed within our organization, and a product that at that moment wasn't serving our customers because it was set up and designed for that on-premise experience. Our CEO called a code red, asked all our engineers to basically work when they weren't sleeping. Like, this is what we need, and we need it for the next couple of weeks. And we built a repeatable e-commerce platform that could be launched like in a couple of hours per site. It wasn't beautiful, but it was functional. And the intent was to give our customers a way to get online ordering up and running overnight, so that they had a way to at least get some product out the door. We similarly started focusing on some of the contactless payment options as things started to imply that they might reopen, because we knew that cleanliness and touch was going to be a super critical part of that reopening experience. But all of this was happening at the same time that we had no income as a business. We had to go through the same thing that all of the industry did. We had to take out that government assistance, which is, hard for any organization to admit they need to do, but we did. And we made a commitment that we didn't want to send any of our employees out into the world without health insurance at that point. So we were going to do everything that we could to keep everyone employed. So we reached out to our employees. We were honest. When I talk about the transparency and the values, this is where that all comes back around. We sat down and had an honest conversation. Here's the reality, y'all. Like, we have to cut money. We have to figure this out. We can't operate as is. And we had enough folks on our team volunteer to go to part-time that we didn't have to cut anybody. So the team supported each other, right? They leaned in and said, hey, I can afford to go to 4 days a week. I can afford to go to 3 days a week. Hey, it might help me at home with my kids. So it was just such an interesting time where it felt like just the weight of everything was sitting, on us, both in terms of serving our customers and serving our employees, but it felt like the world also rallied to make it work. I don't know. The industry rallied. I felt like there was a lot of love and support from the industry. It's when I met folks like you all for the first time, because all of the partners started to work together, right? All of these disparate companies that were supporting the industry figured out how to lean on each other, how to use each other's platforms to get messages out. It was just a phenomenally challenging but interesting time, both for our company, for the industry, for me.
For everybody. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that technology is starting to rally overall to the point of being a little bit more bulletproof in terms of, if something like this were to happen again, what would our plan be?
Correct.
And how would we do that? I did neglect to tell everybody, if you want to raise your hand, you go down to reactions at the bottom of your screen, and you'll have an option to raise your hand there. If you have any questions at any time, we're going to launch into Nancy's 5 best practices or tips and tricks. And we're going to talk about maximizing customer service. So if you have any questions in the middle of any of this, just raise your hand. So Nancy, let's take it away with some suggestions.
You bet. Well, where I'm going to start, and particularly because we have a few up and coming new breweries on the call, is, creating a great service experience begins with the idea. It doesn't begin once you're open. I really feel like having that vision in your head of what you want that experience to be when somebody walks into your establishment needs to be part of every decision you make as you look towards opening. I started to allude to this earlier, but one of my tips and tricks I like to tell people that are in that new stage is, for whatever reason, there's kind of this message in all of the hospitality industry, not just in beer, that the thing that matters most is your credit card rates, right? Your technical decisions start with your credit card rates. That is such a misnomer and such bad advice. And so I just like to call that out. The variance between different companies' credit card rates are not going to be that much. They're going to be at most a couple of cents per transaction. What matters is, can I get product into people's hands quickly? Can I create an experience that wants them to come back? If you can sell, 25%, or a quarter of a beer more per person, that's going to be like 4x any difference you can make in credit card processing. So I want to say that up front, like, focus on what you want, what that service is going to be. Make sure that the systems that you choose to operate your establishment support that service, that you have the tools you need to operate the way you need to operate. And just be making those decisions a little bit more strategically, not just on the point of sale side, not just on the software side, but on the everything side, right? Making sure that you're not creating obstacles to getting your product into people's hands, whether it's in your layout of your space, whether it's the software you choose, whether it's how you choose to staff. Your goal is to create a great experience and make things wonderful for your guests. And so just make sure that's front of mind in everything you do. To expand on that, I would also say, don't box yourself in. You might think that there is a specific way that you're going to operate. And then the realities happen and you're going to have to pivot. that pivot in a lot of cases is going to be a super positive thing, right? You expected to have, a line coming into your tap room where people order in one place. Well, now you're so busy that if you had a line, you're going to have people waiting half an hour for your product. So make sure that you've built in flexibility, that you've got a way to then change those operations when you need to in order to service higher volume. Even if you have low-ish or medium volume, most of the time, you're going to want to do things like have anniversary parties and have Oktoberfest events and have fundraisers. There's all these things you're going to want to do with your space once it's up and running. And you don't have to decide any of this now. I want to be real clear. You don't have to plan for these things, but what you want to do is not box yourself in by making decisions that don't give you the flexibility you need later. So that's another big one. Another thing, and people hate this word, but you deal with this, Julie, I'm sure. Upsell. It sounds icky. It sounds bad. I don't want to be selling to my customers, but you need to build upsell DNA into your team and into your processes. You don't have to call it upselling. You can call it, let's make sure that people always can get what they want. Even if we have to remind them they want it, right? So that's the way you want to think about it. Asking people, do you want to take a 4-pack to go? They might not even know you have 4-packs, right? Did you know we've got these great new t-shirts? Want to see them? Like whatever those things are, I think it's important to just create that DNA and create that instinct within yourself and within your staff. So.
Yeah, Julie says you don't get it if you don't ask, and that's so true.
Totally true. Totally true. You're just leaving things on the table. Creative ways I've seen it done too is like a lot of folks will have a manager on staff, and that manager is, maybe walking around and checking in with people. You just have to add hey, can I grab you another as you're doing that? You don't have to have a full service establishment to do that, but you want to make it easy. Or you want to have the to-go beer in the same area where people pay, and just say, hey, you want me to grab you one of these? Just a lot. There's just a lot that you can do there. And then probably the final one I would say is do care about data. You don't have to be a data nerd, but you do need to care, and you need to be looking at like what is happening on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in your establishment. One of the most magical things I think about data is that it actually gives you a tool to take smart risks, right? If you're going to grow your business, you want to take risk, period. You want to try new things, you want to experiment. And if you don't have any way of getting feedback on those risks, then they're just kind of like throwing spaghetti at a wall. So, use the data, look at your baseline, say, how much beer do we sell on a normal Friday? Okay, what happens if we add a band on Friday? Are we selling more? Are we selling less? Does that offset what I just spent on that band? Things like that. It just gives you that flexibility to experiment and the response and feedback you need to know if it worked. So care about data.
Yeah, those are awesome. I know Julie is a big data nerd. It's been really interesting to talk about how data feeds so many of our decisions. And one of the questions I wanted to throw your way before we go any further is how do you see e-commerce affecting our taproom experience? And how do you see, and Paul's asked a bigger question, where do you see both Arryved and the craft beer industry going in, say, 5 years? But how does this look to you from your seat?
Well, the evolution towards e-commerce also is something that got a big kick, right, with COVID. Folks needed to get their product into people's hands. So they started selling more through non-distribution channels, right? Through direct to consumer. A lot of states now, not all, some states rolled those regulations back pretty quickly, those flexibilities, but other states are actually making it, more legal, more legal-ish, less regulated. And so that's giving folks an opportunity to have an additional revenue stream. I don't think everyone should try and do everything all the time at once. But if you feel like you've really mastered that on-premise, you've got your distribution in a really good place, and you want to start dabbling in DTC or e-commerce, online beer sales, things like that. Don't just afterthought it, like really dig in, be strategic, think about what are the goals of this program? How are we going to implement? How are we going to fulfill it? Fulfillment is actually something that surprisingly is often an afterthought for people. Well, let's put a quick online store up and sell beer to go for pickup, but then they don't really think through that. Well, who's going to fulfill it? When are we going to allow them to pick up? How do we staff for that? So it is more than just a quick extra. There's real thought and intention that needs to go into it. But once you do that, I think that there is a real potential for a new revenue stream. We're seeing a lot of success, particularly in places that are known for doing special releases with kind of that special release online sale. We've had a handful of customers tell us that they, with a high level of confidence, that the people buying beer from them to go and online are not the same people coming into their tap room. So it's additive, not subtractive. But long story short, I think a lot of folks might know that we purchased Craft Peak earlier this year, which is an e-commerce DTC company. We're now integrated. Our teams are really moving forward. And what we see, I mean, in answer to your question, Paul, what we see is kind of a bit of a merging of the two worlds of the e-commerce and on-premise experience. Extreme examples would be what you see in wine, right? Like wine tasting rooms probably sell more memberships for online purchasing than they sell wine in the establishment. I don't think that's here now in brewing. I think there's still too many regulations. There's still too many hoops to jump through. It's expensive to ship. There's just a lot of reasons. But I think the worlds are going to start merging a little bit more in terms of e-commerce and online. With things like QR code ordering, those worlds are getting blurred, right? You're actually on premise, but you're ordering online. I mean, that's essentially what QR code ordering is. And then how do you try and merge those two experiences so that things like, maybe recommendations are happening at the technology level when it's not happening with a server. So I just think there's kind of a merging and blending of the on-premise. I also think folks are really starting to be aware of that continuity of brand across all platforms. You want someone to walk into your tap room and sort of feel the same as they feel when they look at your website. It makes your brand more recognizable, more sticky. I think there's a lot of things there too. And then this is just a general answer that has nothing to do with anything I just said. But in answer to Paul's question, probably the most interesting trend that I'm seeing this year, so if I look at this year, is expansion of tap rooms. I haven't looked at the data recently, but as much as 25% of our customer base now has more than one tap room. Right.
So you're not talking about the size of the individual tap room, you're talking about additional tap rooms.
About additional tap rooms. So, you're doing really well in one location, but you're not getting the traffic from that other neighborhood, expanding over there. Unfortunately, as a result of sort of the backlash and the long economic rebound of COVID, there were a number of less successful breweries that did go under, and the breweries who have been able to get through the harder times are now in a position to kind of pick up those as-built spaces and kind of expand their footprint without the same level of investment. So we're seeing more of that. And I do expect to continue seeing that more. I guess you could call it consolidation, sort of, but just the expansion of existing businesses for sure.
I think your point about the changing regulations is one that is such a big variable. I mean, and the grandfathering in or the extending of the hall pass that people were given, like to deliver for the pandemic to people's residences and things like that, help that blurring to continue at an accelerated pace for sure.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's just moving into a world where we're just going to be thinking of our businesses more holistically versus like segmented.
I think that people are still thinking local though. So it feels to me like on-premise has more potential. Julie might argue that, but I think that the local piece is still very real. And so I think it's harder for farther away breweries to do well in any given area.
Yeah. And you know, on-premise margins, we all know they're way better.
Way better.
Way better. And so if you can continue that on-premise model, I mean, there's quite a few breweries out there now that are, you know, 8, 10, 12 locations, right? You're starting to see just that real repeatable business model once it's figured out. Not all states allow that. Again, like we always have to give those caveats. Every state seems to have its own way of regulating, but
yeah, Candace loves to say it depends.
It depends. Yeah, exactly.
Depends on so many things. Sorry that I just unmuted myself. I figured it's a small group and we're
please
Nancy,
comment.
Nancy knows me, so that counts.
What do you think about that though, Julie? What do you think about local?
Well, it's here's the thing is that I explore the multi-tap room concept with some of my clients sometimes. And what we always run into is who's going to go there and run it? Like who, you know, how do we establish that trust like in a different place? And like who's going back and forth? Because if it's kind of still a small organization, but you're looking to expand, it's like, you know, you kind of have to get some existing people out there to train, you know, get other people up and running. So usually the barrier is like, you know, overhead of some type with like labor. And then there's also like, do you trust that person? Do they have keys? Like, do they have, you know, do they manage the POS system? Like what did all the, you know, all the things, right? But there's a lot of people that like, look at how well Highwire is doing with the multi-tap room. And that's gotten really big. It's not a bad idea because the margins are so good. So like our finance friends would be like, yay, more tap room, you know, more retail, like tap room locations, which is wonderful. But it's harder the further you get away from your home base, whether it's distribution or another retail location or whatever. So I don't think you can go quite as like big, like SKU wise, you know, maybe reduce it down a little bit. And it's weird because I also think about own premise versus on premise. Right. So like, oh, you know, like own is yours, right? But then like on premise, I don't know. I trust the data team at IWSR because in 2020, they were like, on premise is not going to recover until 2024. And or at least not fully, you know, for like volume and rate of sale and all that good stuff. And I'm actually seeing that play out with the data and
one of my
numbers.
Other concerns is that you start to compete with your own off-premise accounts when you start creating more tap rooms, and that can be really challenging.
Yeah, and I'm in no way saying I think this is where the industry should go, but it is a trend we're seeing more and more, right? It was so rare 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's not rare anymore. And which is kind of why I call it a little bit of a consolidation, because that's what it feels like. Like there have been, you know, businesses that go out of business and others that expand. And yeah, that's kind of, but you're absolutely right, Julie. I think the ones that I've seen do it well, they nailed it at home first, like really nailed it. And then in most cases used that staff to go open the next one. Someone you mentioned, Highwire, so I'll mention them too, right? They have a staff who oversees now this opening of new locations because it's become a machine. A very good one with cool spaces. I love their spaces.
They were fun to visit in Asheville. So tell us about your ideal client. Let's kind of wrap up that particular zone. What's a brewery that's ready for you?
Honestly, any brewery, I mean, and that sounds like a cop-out, but it's true. We work with breweries that are teeny tiny and we work with the big dogs. The thing that makes us a fit is that, you know, that service DNA, right? Like you are a business that there are sufficient retail point of sales out there that folks use if what they're just going to do is that sort of counter service, walk up, pay. Where we end up, once somebody's been operating for a little while, they typically move to us pretty quickly. I mean, I'm not just tooting our horn, but it's true, because they start to see the things that they didn't know before they opened. So things like, wow, keeping credit cards physically, having to hold those, that's an absolute nightmare, right? Don't want to do that. We want to be able to keep tabs open, right? Pretty basic thing, but it's a function that a lot of point of sales don't offer. They want to see their revenue data, their beer sold out, separated out by brand, right? It's surprising how many point of sales just say small, medium, large beer, right? So being able to see like what brand and what size at what ounce, if you sell a lot of flights, can be an operational nightmare, right? Just putting all that in, and then how do I track the data, and how do I know what I poured? And so as companies start to either try and be a little more flexible in how they provide service, or start to really dig in a little bit more on the data side to understand what's happening, that's where we come in.
Mm-hmm.
I of course think folks should just start with the best to begin with, and let us grow with you and let us help. But it's okay if you don't. We'll be there when you're ready, and that's really how we operate.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being on the spot in the spotlight today.
Good.
You did put your contact info in the chat, yes?
I didn't, but I will.
Okay, that would be cool. And Dustin's here. So Eli, I wonder if there's anything zoning wise or municipal wise or property wise or in your world that we might be able to learn about and add some 2 cents.
There we go. I was trying to unmute, sorry.
No worries.
One of our big questions is we're trying to, because we don't have the $500,000 to start off a whole tap room and everything like that right off the bat. So one of our big things is we're going to try to do our self-distribution, which a lot of people do it in the area, it works out pretty well in some cases. And we're trying to keep it at low cost. So I'm going to build a garage, a separate building on my piece of property. And we're just trying to figure out, there was another brewer in northern Boston area that's doing it, and he has a garage attached to his house. And I know one of the things is they couldn't access it from the house, which I'm going to be far away from the house. I'm not worried about that. I want to know the logistics of what, besides obviously locking doors and stuff like that, what is it that I'm going to come across that I need to do to make sure I can brew in there and do our thing?
So is that for brewing space or storage space or both?
Brewing. Yeah, brewing and storage. I'll build a cooler, refrigerant and all that stuff for all this, everything that we need in there.
Dustin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I think the first thing you really need to do is talk to your planning department, see if they will even allow you to have, can you operate a business like that from that property? Being
just to head that one off, I am part of the planning board.
Okay, so it's not.
I sit on the planning board for that, so I know I'm zoned. I am zoned for it. I'm in an agricultural zone, so I can. Okay. I know I'm zoned for that part. So that check, all set.
Yeah, I mean, I think you start getting into how much space you need for the system you've got, and then start looking at the building permit requirements. I mean, it sounds like you're trying to do a lot of it on your own, which can be done, but there's a lot of things that you might run into as far as your building permit requirements for engineering, for structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, any of those kinds of things that they're going to require. Drawing stamped by a licensed professional because it's a commercial property. Things that you'll need to watch out for and not run into if you haven't planned for it ahead of time.
That stuff is also nice and easy. I am in the construction field itself, so I know the building I'm going to build is structurally all that stuff. I have electricians in house that can help me on that part of it. That all that minor stuff is really easy. That's the easy stuff. It's what are they going to require for drainage, or do I just build a building with a flat base, flat garage floor and say, there is no drainage?
What size system are you talking about?
We're going to do a 1-barrel system.
Yeah, at that scale, your municipality is probably not going to have any concern about what your wastewater is going to be, because your volumes are going to be pretty low. Everything really comes into what's going to be the most functional for your operation. I mean, even at that size, I would still recommend any fermentation and brewing areas to be on slope floors, slope towards a trench drain. And those floors are coated with the proper urethane. Any areas that are subject to thermal shock, you've got it laid out efficiently so you can bring in your raw materials, send them through the brewing process, and discard of any waste you have. And it just really kind of how everything's laid out. There's not really a whole lot of requirements as far as your codes are concerned about how those things are done, but there's certainly some industry best practices on how to lay that facility out.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely understandable, that part. The 1-barrel system is to kind of get us rolling with that stuff, but we're in the middle of also going to a place and speak. We're trying to set up an appointment with them to do contract brewing also, so we can brew a 5-10 barrel system, that when we know we need that much product to get out there, like kegs for restaurants and everything like that.
Were you planning on building this facility to start at 1 barrel and then grow into that 5 or 10?
No, we're building a facility to eventually grow to get something bigger, or to shoot for the tap room. Where that's the nice long rifle shot right there. This is just to get us on the road and get us flying type of thing.
I mean, if you're starting with a 1 barrel system, it depends on what you plan to do with this building in the future. If it's not going to be for brewery use, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to build a whole lot of brewery specific infrastructure into it that really doesn't have much use after the 1 barrel is out of there. If you were going to scale up to a 3 or 5 or even bigger, I would build with those things in mind. I mean, it sounds like this thing's going to end up being more of a workshop garage type space later, after the 1 barrel's out of there. So really all you're going to need is the infrastructure you need for your water and drains. But even on a 1 barrel system, you can dump most of that into, you can do it by piping into a floor drain or floor sink without having to have a slope floor that you really don't have a use for after the brewery's gone.
You got 30-foot pit with a 10-wheeler full of 3/4 crushed stone in the ground is what I was kind of trying to do.
We say that again?
I was going to dig like a 20-foot pit, a 20-foot hole, and just put a dump truck full of 3/4 crushed stone in there, and it creates like a dry well.
Oh, are you on septic?
Yeah, we're on septic up here.
Completely different animal at that point. I would not be putting any of your brewery wastewater into if you're going to be dumping your brewery wastewater into a septic system, that septic system needs to be designed to handle the content, the makeup, and the volume of what you're putting into it. Granted, a 1 barrel system isn't very big, but I certainly wouldn't just wing it by putting gravel in a hole.
Okay, so
You've got a lot of other issues with that. You've got supposedly dead but still semi-active yeast, temperature potential issues, chemical make pH out of balance issues. All those things at that scale, you should be able to balance everything in a tank before you discharge it to your septic system. But I would be highly unlikely that your municipality is going to let you dump anything into just a trench with gravel.
Okay, so the best bet is just have a slope floor and just work with that one, a 1 barrel system.
Well, no, I mean your floor is different than your sewer system. So all your drains are going to go to the sewer system, whatever that happens to be, whether it's municipal or your septic. But then your floor structure, how it's built, where you put the drains, what type of drains you put in, all would tie into that. So it really just depends, for that 1 barrel system. I mean, when we do some smaller breweries, maybe 5 barrel systems that maybe have a 1 barrel pilot, sometimes we don't even put a drain near that 1 barrel pilot because it's so small. You can basically pipe everything and direct it right towards a drain if you need to. But then where does that drain go after that? It needs to tie into the waste system. And if you've got a business on site and you have potentially an employee there or something, you need a bathroom, you need parking, you need all these different things that are going to be required as far as a structure operating as a business.
Right.
So, those are all kind of things that need to be factored in, and then considering, however the building's going to be built, how you're going to build the floors, how that waste system is going to work. You tying in all your drains together at that size, all your drains can go to the same wastewater system because your volumes are going to be pretty low. But I wouldn't just, that septic system needs to be properly designed for what's going into it.
Gotcha.
Cool.
All right.
Very cool. Hope that's helpful, Eli.
That definitely is.
Thank you, Dustin.
I just
Super
learned that.
efficient. You just, yeah, that's a side benefit of these resource groups is that we all learn how to address those questions,
Yeah.
which is awesome. So a little recap. Thank you all for being here on this December mid-holiday push. Thank you, Nancy, for being available earlier in the month so that we were not on Christmas Eve. So again, thank you for being in the spotlight, Nancy. Thank you to Arryved so much for sponsoring our resource groups. Again, coming up next is going to be our podcast launch. So after the holidays, we wish you a wonderful holiday season. January 3rd, look for our first inaugural 001 podcast episode. We're going to start with the dream, and those will be released every other week. Then our January resource group is Eric Fowler, and he's going to talk about how proper yeast handling impacts your cost of goods sold. Our first educational seminar of 2023 is going to be February 15th with John Hyman. He's going to talk about creating your employee handbook. So all those things are available. You can look for us at startabrewery.com. Our event hub has all that information on it, and we'll be active on social media as well. Candace, anything that you'd like to add?
Nope.
You're good?
Other than it depends is the favorite lawyer answer. It's not just me, it's all lawyers.
You still say that when somebody asks you what you want to order. I think that's fair. Okay, awesome. Thank you all. Eli, thanks for coming. Paul, thanks for coming. Thanks to our contributors. Julie?
Oh, if you don't mind, I want to be respectful of people's time, but I do have a question about
Okay.
Arryved.
Sure.
and specifically. So Nancy, a bunch of my clients and folks that I teach in classes, because I teach about marketing.
Mhm.
So when it comes to email marketing, I know that on Arryved, you can choose to get your receipt, like your check receipt, like emailed to you.
Mhm.
Is there an addition that suppliers can put on there that says like, yes, I would like to get emails from this company as like an extra ask, and then can they get the list if there is a way
yes
to do
to
that?
both. Yes to both. So
Okay.
when they put in that email, there's a checkbox that says, I want to be opted in for a mailing. And then we can provide that list to we only provide it to the super user on the account. We don't want that available to all staff, right? We do protect the data, but all that the person who owns the account with us has to do is ask, and we can provide that data, and we can even set it up to be delivered to them regularly.
Okay, so they just need to ping their
Support.
Arryved person and say like, hey, get me the list like at the end of the month, and then it gives permission for them to utilize email marketing in that way.
Correct. Yeah. And then they have to manage it from there, right? They do need to use a system that has opt in and opt out so people can, but the initial list is theirs because they've opted in when they signed for their.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of
Excellent.
course.
All right. Thank you so much. Happy holidays. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you in January. Thank you. Thank you.